Hello, all. Welcome back. It's been a while. Ben should be joining us any minute now. It's been a long while. It's been, I think, 4 months. He's back.
I'm in the nursing room, so the baby was just here. Naftali was just here.
The baby, look at you, a whole new man.
Yeah.
How are you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing good. Yeah, it's been a ride, but it's very nice.
What an amazing bracha, blessing, and wow, a huge responsibility, huge opportunity, huge adventure, really a gift that God gives us. So I'm very excited for you.
Thanh you, appreciate it. Give us some advice, something. What's
some
your
advice?
Learning.
They grow up very quickly. Cuddle with them and hold them. Okay, because eventually, when they get old enough, they're going to tell you, no, don't do that.
Cuddle me, yeah.
Be patient. And realize that again, it's another example and an opportunity for us to process of making room for others and for another, and allowing them to grow in this mini world you create for them. And very much like God retracted and allowed us to experience his place. And sometimes we fall and sometimes we stumble, and that doesn't mean we're not watching from the side. That means we allow our kids to also experience what life is like. And we give them obviously rules and guidelines that we it takes a while for wisdom to kick in, but it's a huge opportunity. And hopefully not only will it allow you to be a better father, but it will also strengthen your relationship with our Father, the Master of the universe, and realize and appreciate the beautiful gift of life that he's given us. But the main advice is to just be patient and cuddle.
Patient and cuddle. It's
exactly.
Pretty good.
I'm a strict dad, but I cuddle. I'm a big cuddler too. Kalichos verach lirtzot, which I'm sure we'll discuss. Okay, so we're back at it after a little break, and we were going through the Rambam, Maimonides, and we finished chapter 3 and we were going into chapter 4. However, since it's been quite a long break, we thought, as we usually do, we do this recap, but we said we'll just do again a recap of chapter 3, and then we'll move into chapter 4, which is a longer chapter, so it'll probably be broken up over like a few classes. But regardless, this is very exciting. I was just going to ask before we move forward. I know you're still learning with Jacob, but do you have your other chavrutot? They're still working. They're still moving.
Yeah. I kind of, I did. I have chavruta with Jacob. I have chavruta with people here. I have chavruta with friends in Israel. And now we're doing the Tanya too.
You're doing Tanya again?
Doing Tanya again with them.
Very nice. Very exciting also. Hafochba. You have to keep on.
Yeah. And I did Mesilat Yesharim with them before, so
now you're doing it again with Jacob. Oh, so fantastic. Okay, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right, do you want to share the document that I sent you, the AI summary?
Just give me a second.
No problem. Did I put a link in the comments? Yes, I put a link in the comments.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Take it away.
Okay, so do we want to read the? Let me read this thing. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so recap of chapter 3. Talking about healthy and unhealthy nefesh, unhealthy soul. So the health of the soul, or the nefesh.
Do you mind making a drop bigger on your screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Perfect.
Rambam compares the soul's health to physical health. A healthy soul is naturally inclined toward good action and virtues, is balanced, while an unhealthy soul is drawn to negative traits and harmful behaviors.
You have to also remember the context of the Rambam being a physician as well. He's many times going to attribute things to the science that he's most familiar with as well.
Yeah, and he says, I mean, this is a useful analogy that he makes. It's not. And then talking about how moral clarity can be clouded by skewed values, much like a sick person misinterprets sensory input or craves harmful substances.
Right, exactly, right. So like at some point, even though the alcoholic knows he needs to stop drinking, right? Or sometimes he thinks no, drinking is actually what's give I want to be doing this, but and obviously that's that would be we spoke about this, if I remember correctly, sort of about also someone's ego, which is he lives in this echo chamber and he's also only thinking about himself, and that's why he never hears anyone else challenge his ideas, and he's walking around living in a mistaken world, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we read also, if I bring the Mesilat Yesharim into it also talks about the blind person, right? Walking and you don't know, you're both in the dark and you cannot see the goal where you're going. And also you might be blind to other people trying to lead you towards somewhere. So it's kind of like you're in double jeopardy a little bit.
I completely agree with you.
Okay, so what are the symptoms of an unhealthy nefesh, unhealthy soul? People can deceive themselves into believing harmful actions are good, often due to unchecked egos or lack of external moral guidance.
Right, as we were mentioning. Right, we spoke about this. I remember Rav Kook also talks about this. Again, whether we bring in the Ramchal or Rav Kook to soften the Rambam, it's always fine, even though we're doing a Rambam stream. But so misuse of powerful life-rooted forces, right? So obviously the desire. I mean, there's obviously also the whole Freudian element of wanting to sleep with one's mother, but there's a whole concept of wanting something very close, and also the desires for procreation and sexual desires. Right, but we need an external moral compass, I've said over here, to avoid the value distortion, right? And we also, this is in a certain sense why, even with regards to, let's say, same-sex relationships, which there could be a true love there. However, the Torah is saying that remove yourself from the familiar to experience also something new, and you need sort of this moral guidance to realize your natural inclination might be I desire what's familiar to me and like me. And we're also being told that's not necessarily healthy for you.
Interesting. Yeah. I was just talking to in one of my chavutas about intention and how to understand how to get a signal whether your intention is either good or bad, or strong or weak. Those are kind of two separate things that we kind of at first bundled together, but it can be internal, that there is an internal check that you need to do to understand those things, and also there is the external moral guidance, right? The external check.
Correct.
That is applied by people close to you, and by people or things that are far away, that are further away from you. And also, I guess those things can also skew your values. I was mentioning that because because talking about that, about intention with my friends, led me to checking some videos that Verveki was also making about bullshit.
Okay.
And how that can skew your values. So then you're like the outside actually skews your values in a way. So you need to have like a diversity of. You need to be able to check yourself across maybe different places, or have the ability to do that.
Right.
So a striking example here, and I think that last time we talked about, we brought I don't know if you brought Arav Kook and Game of Thrones at the same time.
Right, about Cersei and Jamie, right? Mm-hmm. Saying that, like, right, there's clearly a love over there, but that it's obviously destructive, right? Mm-hmm. And you could see how much pain and anguish it causes just because that's like a relation that they're also realize that they have to like sort of like hide, and like, it shows like a lot of distortions over there. But that doesn't, I mean, it ends, they die together in the rubble, right? And that's also because like she wouldn't leave and he wouldn't leave her, and like you could look at that as like romantic. We also have to realize like how tragic it is.
Yeah, very tragic.
Right. If only they would have read the Rambam.
Mm-hmm. Too bad. I don't know if it exists in that universe.
Right,
It might. Okay, so what is the source of a value hierarchy?
Rambam, right, because there's always a question like, who says like you guys are saying do this or do that? Like, what? How we decide?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting that it says it here. Does it talk about it in?
He doesn't. I'm saying the Rambam doesn't actually directly. I mean, he's coming from a point of view which is like, this is he's already in a certain system, right? So his value hierarchy is obviously built in.
Mm-hmm. So Rambam doesn't directly address, like you said, he implies a divine revelation and tradition, providing the foundation for that moral clarity, contrasting that with moral relativism. And then Greek mythology's labyrinth metaphor shows human struggles with morality without external guidance, while Jewish tradition emphasizes divine guidance as the ultimate source of moral insight. It's interesting.
Right. We mentioned over here, boy. Why don't I even mention? I mean, I know why I mentioned this, but I'm thinking back. Like we mentioned also here, the Ramchal. The Ramchal talks about how, in those garden mazes. What?
He calls it Gana Mevucha.
Gana Mevucha, right, exactly.
Which is interesting for me because I just know Mevucha as not as a mavuch, but as a feeling ashamed or
ashamed, right? So you're walking around and you're lost in this garden, and in the middle there would be like this stand, and there would be someone standing on top of it, sort of pointing out where you need to be going, right? And that's sort of, we use as an example that we have revelation, we have God pointing us where we're going, and unlike the Greeks, where Icarus and Daedalus are there inside the labyrinth, right? And maybe if I'm mentioning this, then we talked about how the Minotaur is supposed to be half man, half bull, which is like the animalistic part of us that also wants to take over, and it's hard for us to control. And because of that, we're lost in this maze. So it comes Daedalus and they build wings, right? Which is supposed to show like using your brain to elevate yourself, to rise, to be able to escape that maze. However, his father warns him, don't go too close to the sun, right? Because Daedalus is doing this from tradition. He's saying like, we're going to use our wisdom that we have through tradition to move past this, but there's nothing past the sun. And that's why don't fly too close to try to understand what's behind that.
Right.
Now he flies and he melts. However, we have in our tradition, God also talks about how he brings us on the eagle's wings, right? And he's taking us to like as high as we can go. And ultimately we know the source behind the sun, ultimately, because that's God. And that goes back to the guy standing in the garden, right? So because we have that connection to this person, he's pointing out where we need to go. If that's what I said on the previous video, or if I misquoted myself, please let me know.
Yeah. Cool. So next, to 3 spiritual states of illness. You have the first one, which is aware and active. So a person or the soul recognizes moral flaws and seeks improvement.
Right. So you realize I got to do something. I'm going to go straight to the doctor, right? Go get your meds.
The second state is you are unaware and you're passive, blind to your faults, and mistakenly believe that harmful actions are good, right? So eating, Rambam has dramatic examples like eating coal or dust.
Right.
But it could be other things like, something very fatty where, you have a problem.
Eating in general is always something the Rambam goes to because like I'm consuming and I'm bringing something into me, right? That could be true to like many of the values or other stuff that I'm sort of consuming, but food is like a very visceral example of that.
Right. And the third state is that you are aware but inactive. So you acknowledge the moral issues, but you refuse to change, which reflects a willful rejection of growth.
Right, which also ultimately ends in devastation usually, right? Like someone that really does not want to change.
Right. And here talks about each state has its consequences, with either spiritual stagnation or death being an ultimate result. Death in question mark.
Yeah, because if can you scroll down for a second? Do we talk about over here about the tzaddikim? Oh, here there's the eagle wings. Okay, it's there. Yeah, the resurrection of the metaphor. So dead, right? The dead being like it can actually lead to death, or it can mean like your life you're not experiencing, it's not being experienced properly, and then yes, you're sort of like a shell of a man basically because like you're not participating in life properly. Okay. Well, we later on we expand on that a little. All right, so go ahead.
So the role of guidance. Rambam emphasizes seeking wisdom from moral authorities, just like when you consult a doctor for physical health.
Just kept on plugging himself.
Yeah. And if you need somebody,
exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone would like roll their eyes. They're like, yeah, we know, we get it. You're the doctor. Go on.
I cover most insurance providers.
right.
Solomon. Shlomo's Proverbs. Mishlei highlights the importance of heeding advice from the wise to navigate moral uncertainty and avoid self-deception.
Right. And we say obviously, and I mean, it's coming from Solomon, who is the wisest of all men, right? But yet he also understands that even the wisest of all men still seeks advice.
Right. So then he brings revelation, talks about revelation as a guiding force, right?
Right, because that obviously we're saying that's the source of his moral hierarchy. That's the guy in the garden. That's the guy that's helping us ultimately.
Right. So that's and then he talks about kind of like what you used in your metaphor, exactly what you used in your metaphor with the being able to see what's behind your moral compass, I guess you would call it.
Right. Icarus wings symbolizing. Okay, nice.
Resurrection is a metaphor. Rambam likens spiritual renewal to resurrection, where repentance revives the morally dead.
Like AI, like I would never use lichens, but here it is. Lichens. Rambam likens spiritual renewal to resurrection, where repentance revives the morally dead. Right. It's talks about how the righteous are in the grave, but their lips are still moving when you're learning their Torah, because by doing that, you're showing how their life force is still alive. And on the other hand, right, like the person that's like we said earlier is actually he's reviving the dead. The quote unquote the miracles they were doing was actually going to people and showing them, like filling them with purpose again, filling them with meaning again, and feeling they have a second life. And while that is, on the physical sense, the person might be alive. Right, on a spiritual sense, he was dead, and I would even say that there could be even be a physical correlation to this as well, right? Which is like I'm saying, suddenly finding a meaning in life could give you vigor, could make you more healthy, potentially could like give you longevity. So like there could also be practical implications to this aside from the spiritual implications.
Right. Interesting. I'll read the summary here. The chapter highlights the importance of aligning one's value with divine principle and seeking guidance from tradition and wise counsel from external sources to maintain spiritual health. It warns against the danger of self-deception and emphasizes striving for moral growth as a continuous human endeavor.
I feel like that's going to be like a lot of the AIs, like summary of each of Rambam's.
Yeah.
But all good. Okay, that was great. Do you feel like you are locked back in?
Yeah, and I reviewed the content. I did a review, a chazara,
Oh, nice.
which is I could, so it was still fresh in my mind. It's interesting to see, like, I mean, the style that we use and that you use, it's like we spend an hour on and we can probably spend more on a chapter, but it's like really concise. Like when I read them back, I'm like, wow, we spent like a whole hour just on like
Hour on
these
it.
3 lines.
Yeah, but I'm
Because you
saying,
can unpack so much, it's obviously. I'm just.
right, I mean, but that's the beauty of Torah, obviously, because like there's so much there, right?
Yep.
There's Rav Sherlow would tell the students of his the parents of his students in his yeshiva, he tell them the Torah is called the ocean of Torah, Yam Shel Torah. He's like, while your kids are here, please let them drown. Let them just be fully immersed. Like, don't have me they're calling home to, every day, every week to come for Shabbat. Like, let them fully be immersed in the multiple layers that there are in these things. So may we, may we tread carefully because we're learning Torah, right? We shouldn't say mutar asur ve'asur mutar. We shouldn't make mistakes, but we should, it's enjoyable swimming together with you.
Right.
So let's move on to 4. You want to put it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm preparing it. Here we go. Let's see. Oh, wow.
What's up?
Safari is being a little
Annoying.
Yeah. Let me just share so that at least you can see me struggling.
I trust you. Maybe once you did it on the Chabad channel, on the Chabad website once.
Oh,
Pirkei Avot. Maybe that was Pirkei Avot.
If it doesn't, yeah, it was Pirkei Avot, but if it doesn't work, then we can switch there, but it might be okay.
Oh, I got it.
Okay. 4.
There we go. 4.
And now it jumps. Here we go. Nice. Okay, 4. Do we want to go with the Hebrew first?
I'll read the Hebrew.
You can go for it.
פרק רביעי ברפואת חולי הנפש. המעשים הטובים הם המעשים השווים, הממוצעים בין שתי קצוות ששתיהן רע. האחד מהן תופסת והשנית חסרון. והמעלות הן תכונות נפשיות וקניינים ממוצעים בין שני תכונות רעות. האחת מהן יתרה והאחת חסרה. מן התכונות האלה התחייבו הפעולות ההן. והמשל בו הזהירות, שהיא מידה ממוצעת בין רוב התאווה ובין היעדר הרגש ההנאה. הזהירות היא מופעלת מהפעולות הטובות, ותכונות הנפש אשר תחביב ממנה הזהירות היא מעלת המידות, אבל רוב התאווה הוא הקצה הראשון, והיעדר הרגש ההנאה לגמרי הוא הקצה האחרון, ושניהן רע גמור. ושתי תכונות הנפש אשר מהן יתחייב רוב התאווה, והיא התכונה היתרה, והיעדר ההרגשה, והיא התכונה החסרה. שתיהן יחד פחיתויות מפחיתויות המידות.
Okay.
Take it away.
Concerning the cure of the diseases of the soul. Let me make this bigger. Good deeds are such as are equibalanced, maintaining the mean between 2 equally bad extremes, the too much and the too little. Virtues are psychic condition and dispositions which are midway between 2 reprehensible extremes, one of which is characterized by an exaggeration, the other by a deficiency. Good deeds are the product of these dispositions. To illustrate, abstemiousness. What is that? The quality of indulging only very moderately. Okay.
Well, that's what he'll call zehirut. Hazehirut.
Mm-hmm. Is a disposition which adopts a mid-course between inordinate passion and total insensibility to pleasure. Zehut then is a proper rule of conduct, and the psychic disposition which gives rise to it is an ethical quality. But inordinate passion, the extreme of excess, and total insensibility to enjoyment, the extreme of deficiency, are both pernicious. The psychic dispositions from which these two extremes, inordinate passion and insensibility, result, the one being an exaggeration and the other a deficiency, are alike classed among moral imperfections. This is the result, the one being an exaggeration. Okay, I don't know.
Okay. So Rambam over here, the English translation is like more confusing than the Hebrew.
Yeah, was hoping the
well, he's, we see over here in this classic form where he's stressing really these connections, right, between the good character traits and actions, right? As we say, right? So like from these actions that I'm doing, subsequently these what will follow sort of makes sense because of these actions. And really most human behavior is stemming from these character traits. And as humans, we really control ourselves, but we make so many decisions throughout the day that we have to build like patterns where I can't be every one of these single decisions trying to like figure it out. I have to know like by these certain character traits what I'm doing, right? So it's very quickly based sort of on that. But I really think, we spoke about this earlier, but like again, to sort of to stress what these good deeds are, right? Because the Rambam sees them as like, and this is true to Aristotle and Confucius, like we spoke about in the beginning, that it's the good deed is really an action that has like two extreme like options, right? Like it's always bad to be on the extreme side. It's on a spectrum, right? And you're trying to be in this dance. If you recall in the second chapter, we spoke about how good, right? Like evil. It's not like I could run to the other side and I don't have to deal with evil anymore. Evil is still in the world. Really, evil is unbalanced good, right? It's sort of like it's like an expression on the edge of good is what we experience as evil. But that's we have to be able to understand how that needs to be balanced. Like someone doing something horrible, like we were talking about incest, which we would be like, that's horrible. We have to realize like in it, there's a stem of ultimately an action that obviously makes sense and also could be deemed very, very good as well. Right. I'm just mentioning that so we remind ourselves because again, he's going to do this dance of like this balance, and he's giving us like sort of like this, what he does in the fourth chapter is really give us like this middle of the road element that we need to be in.
Right. And he kind of, so it's like a gauge. The way that he talks about it here, it's like visually is almost like a gauge where you have like a very low level at one end and a very high level of whatever it is at the top end. And maybe the high level is like red. Like if your car gets too warm, it'll get red at the edges and you don't want to stay there. But if your car is too cold and you've already started the engine, you also don't want it to stay at the blue line, right? The blue singles, you want it to be somewhere in the middle where it's warm enough to continue actually driving, but not too cold or too hot that it's not working.
Right. And but by the way, you just have to also remind ourselves that when we're reading this, we're trying to read from the Rambam. It's Greek terms that are translated to Arabic and then to Hebrew, right? So there's multiple levels of compression over here. Now, just as far as the Zehirut, what that strange word we looked at is really, it's really talking about that balanced and measured approach, even in pleasure, right? And he's saying Sheshnehem Ragamur, right? They're both evil or they're both bad. Like we have to realize we should get what we need, right? Not necessarily what we want to get from things. And also on the flip side, and he's gonna, I'm sure, go into this, but I could decide I need nothing. I don't have to take care of my clothing. I don't have to take care of myself at all. And then you're like, no, now you're disrespecting yourself. And again, you've gone too far, right? You can't function, or the motor version you gave, my car can't drive right now. So let's continue.
So, okay. So we're talking about zirut here.
Right, exactly. I said that's a malot amadot of rova tava ukatzer rishon ve'ader regesh. Someone that doesn't like enjoy anything, right? Someone that only wants and he just wants pleasure all the time, to someone that is completely numb, right? So, like a perfect example. And you talk again, like we talked about. It's the tchuna yetera, which is like, you have an access of it. Ve'ader haragasha, and like not having feeling is like the lacking. Tchuna chasera. And shtehen pritot mufritot midot, right? So they, how does it say, they cause for a deficiency and imperfections. Okay, so let's continue. וכן הנדיבות ממוצע בין החילוט והפיזור והגבורה ממוצעת בין המסירה לסכנות ובין רך הלבב. והסלסול, right? So like an aesthetic. I wonder how they translate there. So we'll see. ממוצע בין התנסות ובין הנבלה. ופירוש הסלסול הוא מי שמתכבד כראוי ואינו מתנבל בדבר. וההתנסות היא שיתכבד האדם יותר מן הראוי לו, והנבלה ידועה. והיא שיעשה אדם מעשים בלתי הוגנים שיש בהם חיתות הרבה וחרפה. והנחת ממוצעת בין הקטרוג והקטרנות, בין רכות הטבע, מה שקוראים בלעז מולדה, והוא מי שבלא דיבור ובלא מעשה לכבדות טבעו וקור מזגו. והוא כנגד הקטרוג שיבוא מחידוד טבעו וחום מזגו. והענווה ממוצעת בין הגאווה ובין השפלות רוח. וההסתפקות ממוצעת בין אהבת הממון ובין העצלות. וההסתפקות, yes. וטוב לב ממוצע בין הנבלה, again we're mentioning נבלה here again, but it's in a different context, but in a different, they're using the word differently, ויתרון טוב הלבב. An axis of טוב לב, of kindness, of good-heartedness. מפני שאין למידות האלה שם ידוע בלשונות, צריך לפרש עליהם, ומה שרוצים הפילוסופים, לב טוב קוראים מי שכל כוונתו להיטיב לבני אדם בגופו ועצתו ובממונו בכל יכולתו, בלי שישיגהו נזק או ביזיון. והוא שעושה דברים הנזכרים בלב טוב, ואפילו אם ישיגהו בזה נזק גדול או ביזיון או טורח רע והפסד מרובה, והוא הקצה הראשון. והסבלנות ממוצע בין הכעס והיעדר הרגשת חרפה ובוז, ובושת פנים ממוצעת בין העזות והביישנות. פירוש נראה לי מדברי רבנותינו זיכרונם לברכה, שהביישן הוא אצלם מי שיש לו רוב בושת. ובושת פנים, בושת is an interesting term, we'll get into that, the word, where it comes from, היא הממוצעת, ממאמרם לא הביישן למד, as we learned in Aspects of Our Father, ולא אמרו אין בושת פנים למד, ואמרו בושת פנים לגן עדן. It's also very good because it says, טוב, לא יתבושת שלו, טוב, we'll get there, ולא אמרו הביישן, ולזה סדרתם כך. וכך שאר המידות יצטרכו על כל פנים לשמות מונחים, להם מהסכמה שיהיו העניינים מובנים. Okay, so you're going to translate this in English, which I think anyone watching this will, will see that there's like obviously a pattern over here. It's actually an interesting list over here, and then we'll like sort of we'll get into them.
Cool.
So take it away.
Likewise, liberality is the mean between sordidness and extravagance.
Liberality.
That's
what it calls nedivut. Okay.
Liberality, yeah, like how we translate. Nedivut is be kind with your belongings or something. I don't know. With your money, I guess.
Yeah, I hear that.
Okay, more practical. So that is liberality is the mean between sordidness and extravagance. Courage is between recklessness and cowardice. Dignity is between haughtiness and loutishness.
Wait, what is it called, dignity over here?
Dignity between haughtiness and...
No, but is... no, sorry, I'm with you. Okay, go on.
Loutlessness. Humility is between arrogance and self-abasement. Contentness, being content, between avarice and slothful indifference. And magnificence is between meanness and profusion. And a note here, since definite terms do not exist in our language with which to express these latter qualities, I think he says that it comes from the Greek. That's why he mentioned it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because these letter qualities is necessary to explain their content and tell what the philosophers, the Greek, meant by them. A man is called magnificent, or tovlev, I guess we had it.
I guess it's
hearted, whose whole intention is to do good to others by personal service, by money, advice, and with all his power, but without meanwhile bringing suffering or disgrace upon himself. That is the medium line of conduct. The mean man is one who doesn't do anything to help them succeed, though he himself may not thereby suffer any loss, hardship, or injury. That is one extreme. The profuse man, on the contrary, is one who willingly performs the above mentioned deeds, is kind to others, in spite of the fact that thereby he brings upon himself great injury or disgrace, or terrible hardship or considerable loss. That is the other extreme. Gentleness, the next one. The gentleness is the mean between irascibility and insensibility to shame and disgrace, and modesty between impudence and shamefacedness. Another note, the explanation of these latter terms gleaned from the saying of our sages, may their memory be blessed, seems to be this. In their opinion, a modest man is one who is very bashful, and therefore modesty is the mean. This we gather from their saying, a shamefaced man cannot learn, from Avot. They also assert a modest man is worthy of paradise. But they do not say this of a shamefaced man. Therefore, I have thus arranged them. So it is what the other qualities. One does not necessarily have to use conventional terms for these qualities if only the ideas are clearly fixed in the mind.
Can you scroll up for a second?
Of course.
1 second. So the Nut is beyond Moshe Tafanim. Can you scroll up a little more? Sorry. Left toe left. Okay, magnificent. Okay, so there's a lot over here, as we just said. What did he call nedivut? Liberality. Right. So we said that's like, sort of self-explanatory, but like sort of being like cheap or spending, or be frugal or spending on oneself. The gvura, the courage, and the fact that it says racha levav, right? That's connecting to what we have in the Torah about going out to war when they're asking me racha levav, right? Don't go out to war. And Rabbi Akiva talks about how his explanation is someone that can't function or can't get the job done because he's too nervous. He feels like the sword is out. I think he says, right. He's nervous about that. Mm-hmm. So on the flip side, you could have someone that is fully willing, doesn't take true life very seriously, and is willing to sacrifice himself or endanger himself. I was challenging my brother when his 15-year-old son went skydiving, and I was saying, there's probably like a halachic, problem with that. How can you explain that being allowed, sort of with like Torah values, one to like jump out for the thrill and risk one's life, right? I would say that probably one needs to take that into consideration next time they want to jump out of a plane. Yeah. How do they interpret silsul? Loutishness, haughtiness, and silsul. Well, it's after nedivut, right? No.
Liberality is the mean between sordidness and extravagant. Courage between recklessness and courage. Right. Dignity. Silsul, dignity.
So that's sort of you could also look at it from like an aesthetic point of view of like,
that's what I thought.
What?
That's what I thought. First.
Yeah, sort of being like, sort of also meselsel b'se'aro in a certain sense, but it's also which is it's akin to a few people, but you could decide to, like the high priest, realize that you still have to have decked out with gemstones and gold, and there's a sense of that, but there's another level where where, doing that in the wrong place could be considered like who do you think you are, sort of only buying like brand names and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, walking to see the king, why are your shoes ripped? Why is your hair messy? There's another sense where you need to look also presentable. And there too, obviously we have that balance. The nachat, right? Which is like basically like, you basically need to be chill ultimately, and realize you have to be like that balance of not taking things, not taking them too seriously, but not to be overcome and bothered by these things ultimately, or like, not being so sensitive to everything happening in the world. Like, right, if like someone's beeping or there's too much traffic and this is like, shaking your whole foundation, it's obviously a problem. You should be a nachat. I joke around with Jacob, which is divrei chachamim benachat ishmeim, right? The words of the wise are heard when you're speaking in a very chill and sort of soothing and relaxed and grounded manner. The anava, right? The humility, like we said, even though not ironically, but the Rambam contradicts himself. I think we mentioned this in one of the other chapters, which is in Hilchot Deot. He talks about how you should have, like, even though it's the middle of the road, right? When it comes to being humble, you should pick an extreme, right? Yeah. And Rav Shirky is always trying to find like the synthesis, also saying that Rambam's not contradicting himself. Rather, he's in one place he's speaking about from an internal point of view. We should realize that we're nothing compared to God, right? So you should have your ego. You should like nullify yourself in a certain level, right? So God could fill you, like what we talked about. Moses, that God was speaking through his throat. Right. So one version looks at that. By one version of the Rambam says he fully nullifies himself. He's being the extreme humble person. So there's room for God to fill him in, right? Because he realized his position. And the flip side is Moses was so confident in himself, as in the healthy amount of ego, which allowed him then to speak confidently the word of God. Right. So there's another sense which on the external level, you should have self-respect and be balanced, right? So you could say the Rambam again is not contradicting himself, but rather, these are two sides of a different coin, or two levels of interpretation. But others could obviously feel free to disagree with that interpretation.
Does it speak to this paradox? I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's the same thing or if it's different between, in a sense, you need to use your free will. If the idea is to make your will his will, right? Which you learned in Pirkei Avot, available on all streaming services. Right. If that's the idea, then you kind of need to use your own free will to nullify your free will, in a sense, right? Because you're saying, I want to use my free will and my ambition, my motivation to do his will. And by that, if I'm doing his will, then it's in a sense, I have no free will because I'm just doing his will. So I don't know.
We spoke about this in CBAX. We're very happy you're here. And I hope you and the family are doing well. We spoke about this in, there's Koniko ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am, right? Which is like sort of this attitude of like me already as the thinking person and free to quote unquote be free will and think the way I want around the world. And we spoke about how in Judaism, we wake up in the morning and the first thing we say is modeh ani, right? Thankful am I. But it starts, the I is at the end, because the second we realize our consciousness, which includes the free will, there's also, we choose to then look at the world and see like how great it is, right? When God tells Job, where were you when I created the universe, right? Like we realize how small we are, and that sort of humbles us immediately. And the first thing we say is we're using our free will to first say, thank you, right? I immediately have created a space for you because I realize how amazing it is that you've created a space for me to even be conscious of your gift, right? So that it's the same concept, it's just flipped on its head. And that's why we start with thanks. Make sense?
Does.
Where were we on our list? We did nachat, we did anava. We keep on scrolling down. By the way, also we should just say that the Rambam, you could also look at the Rambam, just think about this contradiction, that the extreme, being extreme in general is something that is is for the Hasidim to do, or let's say in a Christian context, it would be the Essenes, right? But for your regular Joe, that's not the requirement, so to speak. Again, that's just like another way of looking at it, that he's not contradicting himself. One is talking to the masses, and one is talking to to the righteous Hasid.
Mm-hmm.
We
were at the English and the Hebrew don't necessarily come at the same.
Right. We did this, which was hanachat, right? Being chill, ultimately, right? It says over here, Shalom Dibur. We said, don't let these things lose. The core means go, lose your cool over here, right? Let's scroll down. Right, Anava we spoke about. Vahistapkut. What is that? What is it in English? Being content.
Yeah.
Right. So that is Ezel Ashir Samach Bechako. Who is happy? Someone that's happy with his. Who is the one who is happy? One who's happy with his lot. Right. Being happy with your place. That doesn't mean that you should lose a desire to try to succeed in life. Right. But it just means to realize, to not be looking, looking at the garden's grass. Right. The grass is greener. Understanding to be content with what you have, and just in general of Gamzula Tova. Right. Realizing that this is also for the good, right? Realizing that there's like a lot of things over there that are unfolding that we don't necessarily see, and we think they're bad. But like Joseph, ultimately, God's actions are for the good, right? Now this Tuv Lev, which they call magnificence. I don't know. I think like a kind heart is a kind heart. I don't know. Magnificence sounds like weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, kind-hearted sounds right, because the way that he explains it about how the philosophers explain it sounds like a kind-hearted person. Like, you do things to others to make them feel good, or however it explains it. It sounds like a kind-hearted person or a good-hearted person.
Right. So obviously the nevela, the flip side of that, like the extreme of that would be someone that's like fully, self-absorbed, self-interest, ego attitudes, right? Which ultimately lead to moral decay, right? Or the age of decay, as Paul Vanderklay likes to talk about. On the other hand, right, the taron tova levav, right, the access of over selflessness, so to speak, right, allowing yourself to fully lose yourself into someone else. Obviously, too, that's a problem as well. We should note that, like, I don't think the Rambam did this purposely, but you never know. But it is interesting that these 7 traits, sort of 7. Do we have 7? Right? Yeah. Here? Okay. It's you could connect these, and it's sort of a loose comparison. It's something my mother actually would say once, or I heard her say once in a class she was giving her students, that like there's these 7 biblical characters that relate to this, right? In the Nedivut, you have like with Abraham, obviously, who's like, acts of kindness and hospitality. And in Nachat, you have Aaron, right? Ohev Shalom, V'Rodef Shalom, Aaron, who was always wanting peace. What do we have? We have Gvura, right? Being courageous, is obviously with Isaac, who's willing to, be sacrificed as well. And we had the Nachat, we said, which is Aaron. We had Anava, right? The humility, which is Moses, right? No one is more humble than Moses. And we have the contentment, which is sort of Joseph, right? Which figured out how to manage and figure out sort of also all the finances from a certain perspective in Egypt. Again, I remember it being like sort of a stretch on that one when my mom said that. And Tov Lev, the kindness of the heart, was King David. Also, which is also interesting to look at. I think we went through all of them. So, you could always see these comparisons that the Torah is doing, or like, again, multiple levels of this analysis that they do. But we also had, let's continue going down. Sorry. Right. Zayon. Okay. Right. He's letting himself get destroyed or losing a lot of money. Okay, we did this. Savlanut, or we didn't do Savlanut. So,
right, Savlanut.
Savlanut is right.
Gentleness, the way they call it here, I think.
What do they call it?
Gentleness.
Patience. But it's more than just patience, right? It's really like balancing like anger and like being tolerant for the other, right? Also, again, in the Hilchot Deot, Rambam, there also, he really emphasizes, he's very intense also on anger, but he emphasizes how crucial it really is to have like that balance, and like losing your temper prohibits, it's like a prophecy blocker, basically. You can't get to the place. I mean, there's qualifications to get to achieve prophecy or to experience prophecy, but anger is an inhibitor. And we should realize that. And I always try to learn from that as well, because I unfortunately, the world is upsetting, and I sometimes lose my temper. Okay, let's continue. What do we have after that? We had the Boshet Panim, I think.
Boshet Panim.
Right, and I was saying Boshet Panim, which they call shamefulness.
Shamefacedness.
Shamefacedness. Well, I guess because it's the Panim as well, right? So this is also, this is sort of like azut, like excessive boldness, and there's also like this, complete withdrawal from the world, right? And we also have to be aware how our actions really impact someone else. Like the way we act in a whole conversation, even, which I enjoy in this little corner, where people are generally careful from, like a big personality could completely, take over. We talk about this consciousness Congress in people's brains, but like that could be a positive, right? That you could hold these spinning discs, but it could also be overwhelming if someone completely, monopolizes someone else's like consciousness. But there's
just a small note, just so that we notice, is that the way that it's the Rambam in the Hebrew, or the translation in the Hebrew, the way it says that Boshet Panim is the mean between impudence and baishanut, being shameful or ashamed. And in English, it says that modesty is between impudence and shamefacedness, which kind of sounds like Boshet Panim. So it's a little weird.
They're doing weird over there. I hear that. That's interesting. That's a good note.
So so it's kind of a little backwards in English.
In English. Thank you, Ben, for pointing that out. They also mentioned it later over here with regards to Boshet Gan Eden, but from the word itself, busha, which is shame in Hebrew, and there's also in Aramaic, or like a sister language, like from in this region, bisha is actually evil, right? Like esek bish or mazal bish, like bad luck. This also connects to sort of Adam and Eve when they say they were naked, right? But they weren't embarrassed at the fact, they weren't ashamed. And this is sort of letting us know that sort of before the fall, right, or before sin, there isn't really shame. And shame, in that sense, shame could result from a sense of sort of lacking legitimacy, right? If you don't see yourself worthy, if you see yourself sort of as nothing, right, and there's doubt about yourself, it's sort of sin creeps in. You could even say, you could go a stretch that like, shame is sort of the root of sin. Like when you're not confident in yourself, you already allow an opening for mistakes to sort of to kick in. But again, this is just like playing around with words. It's not. This is a free flowing chabur.
Yeah, right? It's interesting. I saw a video. I think it was. I think it was Reb Joey Rosenfeld. I think his name is.
Yeah.
You see him shared. I mean, he was talking about.
He has a lot of the hand motions.
Yes. He talks about the shame and something else. I don't remember what it was. There's a difference between being ashamed of something and being, I don't know what would be a synonym for that.
Well, I mean, there's like King's Saul Nichbar Kelim, right? Someone that decides, like, to not take all the glory, but
but the way that he was talking, the practical difference or the psychological difference that he was talking about there is that when you are ashamed, it's almost like you're ashamed. You put something on your identity, and which is which is very hard, because if you assume that is the things that you do are also infect your, let's call it the soul, then it's very hard for you to disassociate yourself from that, and it kind of dirties you to an extent. But you can still be not ashamed, but you can be embarrassed maybe, or embarrassed by a certain thing, and by a certain action that you've made, which is which is easier for you to work with, because okay, this action that I did could be inappropriate or cause me a little bit of embarrassment, but I can still, it's not part of who I am, and I can disassociate myself from that. So I think it's a little different, because that talks about like mistakes or erroneous actions, but it's like two different ways of thinking about shamelessness.
Yeah, I mean, shame, busha. It's attributed to King David. He talks about how there's there's these three quality trait identifiers in the nation of Israel, which is baishanut, right, or like shamefulness, or this bashfulness, and rachmanim, and gomlei chasadim, right? So as we said, like in the ethics of our father, lo habaishan lamed, right? So one, it could really hinder one's experience from learning, right? If I'm not to learn properly, you need to expose your own ideas, and that requires exposing oneself. And if you think you're unworthy, then you're not going to let that happen. You're not actually going to learn properly, obviously. So, but with regard to these traits, also even in Rahmanim, right? Like you could be, you don't have to get political, but like there's a whole sense of like if you're too merciful, right? Our Christian brothers would have a harder time with this, right? But like sometimes turning the other cheek could also be like a problem if it's on extreme. And same thing like with the gomlei chasadim, right? Teach a person how to fish, right? Or just give like, so if I keep on giving you favors or doing good things for you, again, that could be like overwhelming, where like I could even build resentment towards you. Like I don't even know what to do with all this good that you're giving me, and it doesn't let me progress properly, or what we would qualify as good, right? Like suddenly you gave me $1 million, but I have no idea how to manage money, and suddenly I go into like crazy debt, or I do silly things. And that's also when we pray to God, we say gomel chasadim tovim, right? Like we qualify it, stress it with tovim, like God, the gifts that God gives us are measured and precise for what we need, right? We don't like, there could even be an excess of plentifulness, right? Like suddenly like, what's that movie of like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, right? Like, I wanted like any food possible, and now I have like pancakes falling on my head, so to speak, right? There's like an alignment problem sometimes when you're trying to do a favor for something. By the way,
right, overshowering somebody with gifts, or overwhelming somebody with information. You want to make sure that they understand everything, so you just give them all the information. But it can be too much.
Not to go on a tangent, but like I'm just thinking, because I mentioned like the political thing, but even the baishanut, right? These traits could also, if they're in an extreme, they could be on a national level. They could also be problematic, right? Like if I'm, if you are bashful or about your nation, like you could question your own like legitimacy, right? Like unlike other nations that sort of like emerge naturally, right? The idea of this of the nation of Israel, it's like a conscious decision that's rooted sort of in free will, right? Like God comes to Abraham and says, "Go forth," and God and Abraham decides to like, I'm going to do this with you together, and I'm going to like make a nation. And God says like, I'm going to bless. Like there's a whole sense over there, which is like God is sort of saying like, I've seen how it's being done naturally. I want it to be done properly. Do you want to do it with me? And a guy comes and says like, I want to do it with you, right? So like, and that's sort of it. So like questioning sort of the legitimacy is like intrinsic to our Jewish identity, because like it's not natural, right? It's a decision that someone made, and you could always be looking back and saying like, should have Abraham said, yeah, I don't want to do that. But Abraham like decided to be like, I want to do this. And it's sort of, I guess also even to the world and to our Arab brothers, I feel like we have to feel confident in saying like who we are as a people and as a nation. And you could even say that the the Torah gives us even commandments to let us sort of counterbalance these things, right? Like being too bashful, and then there's like the destruction of Amalek, or Lotu Guru, right? Not taking like advice or be influenced from other people. Yet we also have like very opinionated. So there's like a whole sense where like the Torah itself balances these traits from us. But we've gone astray, and we ended at an hour. So what do you say? We'll pause here.
Yeah.
Can you scroll down?
Yeah, I was looking at this. Like we have
me too. Okay, awesome.
Paragraph.
It's a doozy.
It's a doozy. It's a good one.
It's a good one.
Like any of them.
Yeah, correct.
Still, you could do you back.
You got it, brother.
Oh, thank you very much, Chezi. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad that we're back. I'm going to, if anyone wants, I'm going to chill for like just a few more minutes. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate it, Ben. That was great.
Cool.
Amash, it just did it's just so good for like our souls right now. So happy to be learning again. I literally came from a meeting, just like with a few people from this new neighborhood we moved into, talking about like making sure like their daily prayers are there, and the opportunity. There's like a lot of people that are here that like are very hungry for like spirituality and like how to engage them properly. And there's people in the group that are more, I would say, quote unquote, right wing. And they want to, and I'm telling them this is an opportunity. Like maybe this is like where you have to, it's not a compromise, it's rather growth. But like growth also means like you inspiring them might mean also you changing some, parts of how you're experiencing how you experience Judaism. However, I did preface that by saying like, we need to work on making sure that there's daily prayers like in proper times, and making sure that there's a kollel, and we could be learning during the day. My brother and I are going to be learning, and he moved in next door to me, and he wants to be where the connected house is. And he's like, I want to learn. He's like, but I don't want to do the charuta in the house. I want to do the charuta in the synagogue. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying from that to come to this is just go Torah.
It's nice. Yeah, new challenges. I mean, new neighborhood, new challenges, and it's new opportunities. It's
Mamash.
B'atzlacha.
See you next week, Ben.
Bye, Chezi.
Bye. Ben's awesome. Oh, it's so good to be back. Anyone that's still left watching, I hope you enjoyed and followed. I went not off the rails, but I went into a little rabbit hole with regards to this King David thing. This is definitely an interesting chapter. It's a fantastic chapter. And we're also going to be having I'm only seeing the comments now. Sorry. Hey, Chaz, this is a Jewish version of a conversation about determinism and free will. No, not really. I don't know if you're here. RJ Stevex will definitely not, but I'm going to research the topic may come up later. Send to you, DC, but we have to talk about the live stream. All good. Enjoy. RJ, I hope you're doing well, even if you're still listening to this or seeing this later. Stand for 2 more minutes. Everyone wants to schmooze for a few. Gilad, it's good to see you, buddy. I took offense myself. You're going to kill me right now. I got to run. I said I'm going to stay for 2 more minutes, and now I'm bouncing. But, guys, Gilad's here, and we're still going to schmooze. And it's been a while. We had a big break from our ruminations about Israel. and I would even and we'll discuss this more with Vlad, but like you've had me you've illuminated things to me, so I appreciate our conversations. It's I don't know if you realize, but you've created a shift in some of the way I think about things. So be confident. We could a revolution's on the way. I'm still optimistic, Gilad. But we'll schmooze. We'll talk. Yeah, bye, man.
Just going to say hi, and now bye.
Yeah. Bye, guys.